everyone, welcome to Retronauts Pocket, episode 6. I'm Ray Barnholtz, your steed, your captain for this. With me, as always, Bob Mackey.
Hello.
And Jeremy Parrish.
Wait, you're a steed, so do we have to ride you around?
I'm cutting you out.
Damn it. Not of the will.
He's the god now.
And our special guest from last episode, Matt Leone.
Hello.
Hi, and thanks for sticking around. So, this Pocket episode, much like my last one, will be about accessories. And last time I covered NES accessories. And this time you may think I would cover Super NES accessories, but no. I'm going to do a 180. I'm going to flip your script. I'm going to totally rock your world by covering Sega Genesis accessories.
People are still going to say we talk about Nintendo too much.
Yeah. Hey, folks, let's just wait and see.
Give us a chance.
We're getting the softballs out of the way first.
I'm going to say this may not be the most positive one, but only because we're talking about accessories and not games or anything. So keep that in mind. So to preface things, I could have covered the Master System, but pretty much everything about the Master System came from Sega themselves, and there were not that many accessories. There was like the arcade stick and the 3D glasses.
And the light phaser.
Yep. And in Japan, the FM sound unit. But that's pretty much it. So in the rise of like the 16-bit days with the Genesis, many more companies came in and saw an opportunity to cash in by creating off-market accessories, aftermarket. And Sega still made quite a few themselves, though. And I think one of the earliest ones that I'll start with is the Power Base Converter, which is linked to the Master System, quite literally. It is the converter box that you plug into the top of the Genesis, and then you plug in your Master System cartridges or cards right into them. And it's backwards compatibility for a small fee.
Do we know what that fee was?
It's probably
Is it
like
the price of a
$99
game or something, or is it much more?
I'd imagine it'd be more in the game price
Yeah,
range.
I think it was $99.
Wow.
Okay.
Or thereabouts. But yeah, I mean, basically that was Sega doing what Nintendo don't, because, Nintendo very famously had originally said, we're going to put backward compatibility into the Super Famicom so you can play Famicom games. Same with the Super NES, you can play NES games. And then Nintendo doesn't, I don't know, their business model is keep it lean, keep it minimal, cut down extra costs, and eventually they decided, why do we want people to be able to continue using their old libraries when we could cut costs on the hardware and make them buy entirely new games?
I think that was less obvious when you compare how you put in games in the NES compared to how you put in games with Super Nintendo. But with in Japan, they were both top-loading, so it would be a more logical jump.
Yeah, I mean, eventually they made a top-loading NES.
Right, but not until like 93 or something?
Right.
Something like that.
But yeah, I mean, the Super Famicom and Famicom had more similar cartridges.
Yeah.
And that was also the case for the Master System and the Genesis.
Right.
They had those low-profile, stubby cartridges.
Yeah. Not to harp on Nintendo too much right at the start, but...
talk about Sega. We first need to talk about Nintendo.
the prototypes of the Super Famicom, did involve, like, what they called a Famicom adapter, which was also a redesigned Famicom.
I thought it was just a separate slot.
I'm thinking of, like, photos from, like, an old press event. Where they also had two different units, and the explanation behind them was a bit foggy. But yeah, so the Power Base Converter lets you play all those Master System games, or at least most of them. I don't know if there were any incompatibilities, but
none that I've heard of.
Yeah.
It was a Master System chip.
Yeah,
and it was just basically like a pass-through to use the Genesis's video out system to play like Master System hardware.
Yeah, makes sense. And of course, I don't know how many people really bought one, considering the percentage of Master System users in America, at least, compared to Nintendo. But they distributed it nonetheless, and yeah, it was what Nintendo didn't.
And there were some out there, because I did end up buying one used, and had it for a while for a Genesis I owned, and it was kind of neat.
I mean, if you were smart enough to think, I can get this thing for, probably cheaper than a Master System, then get some of the good Master System games also for cheap, then I have a little bit of an extra library.
And,
if you cared enough about games.
Right, and I mean, if you are someone who owns a 16-bit console and you really want to play ALF, how are you going to play an ALF game besides using a Master Bit or Power Base Converter?
Big shrug is my my reaction.
You could play ALF, one of the many other ALF games.
But that's what I'm saying. There were none.
I know.
Maybe a browser game. I don't know.
ALF and Pog World.
That was a hack of Alex Kidd, right? In Brazil.
I wish. Why didn't they just take Alex Kidd, chop off one of those serifs from the E? I was thinking about.
Wow.
Right?
Alf X. That's kind of
okay, and the X.
That's the extreme '90s version of Alf.
No. Okay. Good. Still good.
After his life on the world of Melmac.
All right.
Gordon Shumway goes hardcore.
One thing I do want to say is that there were a few things you could plug into the Genesis cartridge slot, including the 32X. But it's that and the Sega CD. Technically, those were platforms. Those are separate platforms for extra games, and so I don't consider them accessories so much in terms of this discussion, at least. So
I consider 32X an accessory to a crime.
That is true. That is
and
true.
The death of Sega.
You can define it that way. Just word of caution.
Yeah, well, no, Sega CD definitely was a viable platform on its own. There was a lot of good stuff for that system, even if it didn't all come to the US.
Just a note for listeners, we won't really be talking about those. But next I want to jump to Japan and talk about the Mega Modem, which was released pretty much like a couple years after the Mega Drive came out in Japan, and one of many different kinds of modems that were released for the Genesis.
Question for you, Ray. I was this ever advertised in the United States before it didn't come over here? Because I remember seeing it like on a poster or something, or something like of that nature, some kind of PR material.
Yeah, it was one of those, we intend to release this at some point, maybe, who knows. But yeah, it did actually come out in Japan and was supported by Sega. It was basically not just the modem, but it was basically like a package of different network-related things. You had the cartridge interface and whatever else. And, of course, you could access an online service that provided you with game downloads. Not full game downloads, but original, like, smaller games offered by Sega, such as, like, little puzzle games, Sonic-based puzzle games, and Pyramid Magic, which was brought back on GameTap, I believe, in America, distributed that way. And the Phantasy Star Text Adventures. Yeah, different, like, visual novels, that sort of thing. Very short form, small games distributed over the network. And of course, it is a precursor to the Sega Channel, which we can also talk about as well right now. Released, I believe, in 94 or 95 in America. Basically, a cable modem for the Genesis. You would hook it in there, and then, assuming you had the correct cable provider that Sega had a partnership with, Time Warner, I suppose, or TCI, you could get access to this thing and subscribe to the service and get a monthly influx of games, new and old, and some exclusives. People know it best as pretty much the only way to play Mega Man The Wily Wars in America for quite a while, because they were going to release it in retail, but decided not to. So it was a Sega Channel exclusive. And some of the features of Sega Channel sort of telegraph things that you can do now. You can get game demos, time demos, and you have news updates, all the stuff that we all so take for granted now. But those two early network initiatives from Sega were kind of neat in that way. And of course, Sega would push on later on Saturn and Dreamcast.
Was there any other way to play Wily Wars, or was that it? I don't remember it ever being released on any other platform.
Oh, no. I mean, it got a European retail release.
It's so
in Japan too.
Right. I mean, I think like the doom of Sega, or like Sega's. I don't know. It feels like they were always ahead of their time, and that's what killed them. It's like this was Netflix, and I feel like this is the way game distribution is going to work soon. If it doesn't, if nothing, no major shakeouts happen. But I mean, PlayStation Plus is sort of like what the Sega Channel is now, where it's like here are the free games this month.
Yeah, exactly. Sega also branched out into different sorts of. I mean, they took on anything they could, basically, or wanted to. Like, there was a weird initiative, I think, by Blockbuster Video to, like, distribute media. You'd go up to the kiosk and then, rewrite the media and get movies or music, and then games, only Sega Genesis games at the time, but you could get this rewritable cartridge and then take it home.
Wow.
That was I forget the name of it now. I think it's involved the name Leaf or something like that. But yeah, Sega would do almost anything like that. As far as accessories, though, I'll go a little bit simpler and just talk quickly about like the different controllers, such as the arcade power stick. Very early release, I think, close to the launch of the Genesis. And much like the Sega Master System joystick, just a big thing, big buttons. They did release a 6-button variant later, maybe not in America. I did not completely check up on that. But after that was the 6-button pad. And that was released in America in time for Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter 2, and you needed it to play those properly.
So did it launch with the? I know the first Street Fighter 2 on Genesis was Championship Edition, right?
Special
Championship Edition, and that was it. The controller came out like sort of alongside of it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much same time as that in Mortal Kombat, because they were 5 and 6 button games. Genesis was only 3, and unless you wanted to try
Hold down the start button,
right, fiddle with that
modifier. Yeah.
You had to buy. Same situation that PC Engine owners would face with Street Fighter as well.
Oh God.
But it's funny because it's possible to play a good Street Fighter style game with only 2 buttons, and SNK really got that right with their Neo Geo Pocket Color games, where they figured out, the strength of an attack depends on how long you hold down the button.
Yeah.
It's weird that no one stumbled onto that, which seems like a pretty obvious mechanic in hindsight.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe they just thought, no, it wouldn't be practical or something. But yeah, you're right. You think that would have been decided a bit
or maybe
earlier.
maybe that would have changed the timing of the game. So I guess it makes some kind of sense, but
It's also like if they built the controller that way, maybe they didn't think about that ahead of time. And I don't know the programming side of it, but it might have been more difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Genesis 6-button pad also had the mode button, which I guess for some games that would completely blank out at the prospect of 6 buttons. You had to hold it down or something when you started a game, so it would revert to a 3-button mode.
I mean, the move to 6-button controller was necessary if they wanted to keep competition alongside the SNES, but it felt like it created this weird have and have not classes as far as Genesis owners went, and so they could never take advantage of the 6-button controller too much because there's always going to be people who didn't have it.
that does happen though. I mean, sometimes moving forward in the middle of a generation of hardware requires that kind of have and have not, and Sony had to do that with the dual.
That's right. I was trying to think of another. Yeah, that's right. But I feel like more games took advantage of that, and they were willing to cut more people loose. Like, no, Ape Escape, you need this.
Right. There weren't a lot of Sony PS1 games designed specifically for the DualShock, but a lot of games took advantage of it. They did a good job of balancing that out. But I guess, no, I don't know. I was going to say, 3 to 6 buttons is a more fundamental change, but I don't think so. I think the second analog controller, and, just analog control in general makes a big difference.
Well, anyway, I'm sure Sega sold many of those 6-button pads, and of course other companies released 6-button controllers once that started to become the agreed-upon standard. Capcom released their Street Fighter arcade stick for the Genesis as well. This great big thing,
I had one of those.
Yeah.
Hated it.
I had the Super Nintendo version. I liked it.
I really wanted to like it, but in retrospect, the buttons, you press one side and it gets stuck all the time, and maybe it's just mine. Maybe I
don't
spilled
remember.
soda in or something.
Maybe.
It seemed like it at the time it was great to have any stick, but then looking back, it's
that one was backwards compatible with the NES, and I lost the connector cable to the Super Nintendo one, so I had a very elaborate NES joystick for quite a while. Back to the Genesis. We had very practical things like a 6-button pad, but there was also a brief period where Sega just sort of was playing catch up with Nintendo. And when Nintendo made the Super Scope for the Super NES, Sega countered with the Menacer for the Genesis, which again was a very unrealistic looking gun, gun for the Genesis.
Although it still had gray at that time, right? It was before they were forced to do orange guns.
I remember it being a grayer shade of...
It had the orange nose, I believe, or a red nose.
Yeah, I mean, they had to make the Zapper orange for the NES, so...
Okay.
So that was, that predated the Menacer.
Yeah.
It wasn't I remember it was Saturn, I guess it was that the entire gun became... bright.
And then the GunCon.
And Dreamcast, where the gun became totally transparent. You couldn't even see it.
Yeah.
It's like a miracle.
So, the Super Scope was not that well supported. There were a few games made for it, and not all terrible, but, the Menacer got pretty much nothing.
Oh.
I would say so.
There's one big example I'm getting to.
Go ahead. Matt, go ahead. You haven't talked enough. Go ahead.
Terminator 2.
Right.
The big, the main arcade game, light gun game of the time.
You are right. In fact, let's play the commercial for that right now.
When I play Terminator 2 with the Sega Menacer, I'm not afraid of deadly hunter killers, the indestructible T-1000, endless endoskeletons, the evil Skynet. Nothing.
Bobby! Come give your Aunt Bertha a big kiss.
Well, almost nothing.
Whoa.
let's not guess what's going on in the last seconds there.
That was totally in my face.
Yeah. But the Menacer did also come with a pack-in game, much like the Super Scope, which included a very rare appearance from Toe Jam and Earl.
I was going to mention, it was weird that's one of their 3 Sega Genesis appearances.
Ready, aim, tomatoes.
Yeah.
Which sounds great. Sounds like a great concept, but it is basically just running around shooting tomatoes at enemies that come in on the screen, and, Toe Jam and Earl cheer you on. Hey, whatever works.
So kind of like a precursor to Point Blank?
A little bit. Still not as fun. There were other games, I believe, in that pack that I have no idea what they were. It's really, Toe Jam and Earl kind of stand out on that. But yeah, Terminator 2, maybe Revolution X. I have no idea.
Wasn't it later than that? I can't remember.
It was later, but
like
they couldn't support it.
Lethal Enforcers, you couldn't use the Menacer with, could you? I know that had its own gun and everything.
Lethal Enforcers, speaking of light guns, Lethal Enforcers came with the Justifier, blue gun, much like the arcade cabinet, bright blue. You could send away for the pink one, the Player 2 gun, which I believe was daisy-chained onto the Player 1 gun with like a telephone-type cord. That was that. Yeah, that was sort of the brief light gun history of the Genesis.
Justifier is such a weird name for a gun. I've got a gun. What's my opinion is right.
Yeah.
Or else it's just it aligns everything along a column.
I think it's more the first one.
Nothing says I have a power trip than the
Like the
Justifier.
Justifier.
Yeah,
It's like Death Wish guy named it or something.
exactly. So again, like I said, Sega met the Super Scope with the Menacer. They also met the Super NES mouse with the Mega Mouse.
Oh, I forgot about
Whoa, I've never heard of that.
What the hell did you play with that thing?
You played Art Alive.
Okay.
I believe you played Wacky Worlds with it. And
Was there a port of Lemmings to Sega Genesis?
There was, but I'm pretty sure they did not support it. I think it was before that. Yeah, it was basically just like, they made a mouse with this art game. We better make a couple of those too. Pretty sure that was just the story with that.
Okay, I take back what I said about Sega not seeing Nintendo as a rival as much as Namco.
Yeah.
Clearly that's not correct.
Well, at least Sega of America, right? These are American things.
Yeah, I don't believe it came out in Japan.
Yeah.
It came out in Europe.
If it's called Mega Mouse, it had to have come out somewhere outside of the US.
Yeah, I mean, why not? So yeah, not much to say about that. However, next up is pretty much the Genesis's Power Glove in the fact that it became sort of infamous over time. I'm sure you already know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
This is the Sega Activator.
I've always wanted to stand in the middle of a U-Force.
Uh-huh.
All my dreams can come true.
It's like a power pad and a U-Force and a Power Glove all at once.
It's like, what are the worst ideas and how do we combine them?
It's like an Omni, right? Isn't that what it's called these days?
I don't know.
The Oculus thing?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
It lives on through this hand.
I see. So yes, the Activator is a hexagonal ring, and each of the sides of that hexagon basically have an infrared beam shooter that lays up. You lay it on the floor, it shoots up to the ceiling basically, and you move your arm or your hand into the path of that beam, and that registers as a button input.
Yeah.
Let's listen to a little bit from the instructional video that comes with the Activator, which I believe was like over $100. By the way.
Remember, the Activator is for indoor use only. Any room with a standard ceiling height will do. Just be sure to give yourself enough space to move around. You don't want to be crowded when you use the Activator. Avoid setting up directly beneath light sources. Also, avoid metallic or mirrored overhead surfaces.
Make sure all your pets are out of the room. This thing will blind them.
I like that they use Super NES slap bass for that.
Yeah.
By the way, it also came with a set of stickers for button labels that you could button labels.
Controller. Panel 2 is the B button. Panel 8 is the C button. Panels 1, 3, 5, and 7 act as the directional pad. When hit individually, panels 4 and 6 are like the A button. When hit together, they're the start move.
What?
You know what this reminds me of, Ray? It reminds me of the instructional video Homer's watching to fix his drywall.
Yes. That's your Activator primer. And by the way, does this sound familiar to anybody?
You are the controller.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Why do we never learn? Why?
Yeah, why do we?
Jeremy's just quit video games.